Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot, where we try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left and Rhino right. I'm your host, Myron Ybarra.
And I'm your co-host, Angry Mike.
All right, let's say you're in a debate or an argument with someone, or maybe even a group of people, and after all of the facts are laid out, you find out that you're the one who was right. Now, this is where you're supposed to get at least a bit of satisfaction because the person or the people who were wrong usually volunteer to eat just a bit of crow. If they are big about their loss, they'll even issue an apology, and maybe if you're lucky, maybe you'll witness a bit of self-flagellation by the losing person or that group. Then what should happen is everyone walks away from the experience just a bit wiser. But that didn't happen here. In fact, I'm willing to bet that if you're watching this episode right now, you probably didn't even know that you were in the group of people that was right. Well, what the hell am I talking about? It's likely you're right about the fact that our government found that the entire COVID response was an absolute failure. And in some cases, appeared to be nothing more than a grift of the American taxpayer. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to a, relatively unknown document titled the After Action Review of the COVID-19 Pandemic, dated December 4th of last year. It's likely you've never heard of this report or the Congressional House Oversight Subcommittee. And that's because the mainstream media has all but denied its existence. In fact, a Google search revealed only one mainstream media outlet reporting the existence of this report, and that was The Hill. This document was presented following the subcommittee findings from the House of Representatives on the coronavirus pandemic. The subcommittee was convened February of 2023, almost 2 years ago. The subcommittee was comprised of 16 House representatives, with 7 of them being Democrat and 9 of them being Republican. And given the size of this report at over 500 pages, I'm only going to be able to touch on some of the key areas of the report. However, I have linked a copy of this report as well as, again, all the receipts for today's presentation in the description section below. So please go ahead and take a look. Let's get into the very first highlighted topic, the finding that the SARS-CoV-19 virus likely emerged as a result of a laboratory or research-related accident. Now, I don't necessarily believe it was an accident, but we can finally scrap the bullshit claim it was a natural jump in the virus from animal to human, or it came from a wet market in Wuhan. And since the virus originated at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, one could assume reasonably that the virus was likely engineered to be transmissible to humans as a result of it coming from a lab. Hence, the gain-of-function claims made by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. There is testimony and published records from the Wuhan Institute of Virology that proves that they were conducting gain-of-function research into viruses that were in the SARS-CoV family. And the United States did have a relationship with the Wuhan Institute of Virology because those exact same records show collaboration between the United States and China, where they were both involved with secret projects within China's military beginning right around 2017. Finally, researchers collected numerous animal samples from various markets throughout the region and were not able to find one single infected animal. So, if you were one of those people who didn't believe the wet market narrative produced by our government, parroted by the media, and you had the courage to speak up, well, pat yourself on the back, because you were right and they are liars. Mike?
I remember I had I still have a liberal Asian friend, and he outright called me a racist for even stating the virus came from China. But when I started talking about it being created and released on purpose, the shit hit the fan with liberals across the board, on and off social media. I was constantly, being censored on Facebook with posts being flagged for misinformation, posts being pulled down completely. And then, the fact checking kind of came into the mainstream and, or the so-called fact checking. And I never believed for a minute that the virus came from eating bat fin soup or whatever the hell they were saying it was coming from. To me, the timing was suspect, and this was the perfect shitstorm, honestly, to derail the Trump presidency. And unfortunately, I think it worked, and there's no way that they could beat him at the ballot box without the resulting chaos.
Bat soup? I never had bat soup. Normally, it's prepared by slow smoking over hickory. Next is the finding that doctor, and I use that term very loosely. Anthony Fauci, aka Dr. Ouchie, played semantics with the definition of gain of function research. This committee found that the term gain of function really didn't have a set definition in the scientific community. As a matter of fact, the definition has evolved over time. The committee did find that this phrase was actually defined back in October 19, 2020 by the NIH to mean a type of research that modifies a biological agent so that it confers a new or enhanced activity to that agent. Well, in lay terms, engaging in gain of function on viruses allows a virus that had certain characteristics, either lethality or transmissibility, to be changed in one way, shape, or form so the virus could be more transmissible to more organisms like humans, or could be made to be more lethal. Now, Dr. Ouchie testified before the Senate Committee on Health, Education, and Labor, where Senator Rand Paul asked directly if gain-of-function research was occurring with NIH funding to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And if memory serves, Ouchie categorically denied it. Wait a minute, hold on. I don't have to recall. Here's a video of the liar, Dr. Ouchie.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function.
So
let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get
NIH,
one person.
Let's read from the NIH
Chair,
definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
In essence, the subcommittee found that Dr. Ouchie was hiding behind the very loosely defined phrase gain of function. And at best, it was misleading. I can't tell you how insidious I believe this asshole is. The fact that he's walking around free with a very, very sizable pension from the United States government, your tax dollars, my tax dollars, as a result of his involvement in the destruction of the United States is a gut punch to every single American. This asshole ruined the lives of millions of people, and just putting his face up on today's presentation and listening to his mousy voice lie to the American people, well, just boils my blood. Every lie he spewed as a result of COVID-19, the virus, and our response to it was never about protecting Americans. It was about his own self-interest. Mike, who's your favorite doctor?
Dude, that little lying sack of shit was in front of Congress on more than one occasion. We both saw it. Every time Rand Paul ripped him a new one, caught him in lie after lie. But, like you said, the semantics saved his ass from being found in contempt. And you could tell the lawyers were giving him, all the words to put through Congress to save him. So on a related note, he also lied about the funding of the horrific lab tests on beagles, which that wasn't in this report. And that motherfucker is still walking around, like you said, free as a bird with a fat pension, full medical. And I know a lot of people still hold him accountable for the AIDS epidemic back in the 80s. That's a long story, and it's, we can't talk about it now. It's rarely discussed these days, but I'll just leave the audience with this, to summarize what Fauci's all about. He is one of Satan's minions.
He might even be the Antichrist. Now, we're going to go on to medical misinformation or disinformation. I don't know which it is, but if you happen to know what the correct phrase is, please post it down in the comments section below. The World Health Organization, also known as the WHO, is an agency within the United Nations who's responsible for directing and coordinating international health. Given that the United States is part of the United Nations, the WHO is also supposed to support the United States. And it should, because the United States is the largest contributor to the United Nations, and thus the WHO. But the Oversight Committee found that the WHO is in bed with the CCP, and they appeared to be taking on the role of the CCP protector when evidence pointed to the fact that the CCP was involved in the lab leak at Wuhan. During the fact-finding phase of trying to determine where the virus originated, the WHO avoided placing any blame on the CCP, and in fact, ladled on praise to the CCP's transparency during the early days of the virus transmission. Don't mind the fact that the CCP lied to everyone about the infection rate and deaths related to COVID-19 in China, which were parroted by the WHO. In fact, the WHO initially denied human-to-human transmission of the COVID-19 virus based on CCP propaganda. I'm sure many of you remember the lambasting the legacy media and Democrat politicians here in the United States gave Trump when he suggested that we close international flights coming from and going to China. And that was back in early 2020, I believe. That's when all of these moronic Democrats were claiming Trump was a xenophobe. Now, if any of these people actually had a smidgen of morality and maybe a touch of humility, they would have immediately apologized to the American people for their role in propagating the transmission of this virus throughout the United States, and to Donald Trump for inaccurately and unfairly labeling him as a xenophobe. But we know that's not going to happen. So that's why this report was generated, and that's why I and Mike are telling all of you. Mike?
Yeah, I can't agree with you anymore. The WHO is about as trustworthy and useful as the WEF, in my opinion, and NATO, and all the other acronyms used for the various organizations that are used to push the globalist agenda. That's a one world government. That's their goal. The NWO, if you will, sounds ominous, but it's pretty clear that's what they're trying to do. The head of the WHO, I forget his full name, but goes by Tedros. He's an Ethiopian public health official, and he's not even a doctor. However, he is a fucking communist who actually bumbled the Ebola outbreak in his own country, and he's a total shitbag that has no business being the head of any health organization, let alone the WHO. And by the way, there was a globalist treaty. Thank God it was not signed and not finalized. That would have given the WHO near unlimited powers in case of another, pandemic. And that would have given them tremendous control over our country, all the countries that signed it, basically giving it over to a multinational organization that we have no control over. So let that shit sink in.
And that's why you and I are here. And since we're talking about medical misinformation or disinformation or whatever it is, let's talk about all of the COVID-19 mandates that our government put into place without a shred of evidence of the efficacy of those mandates. First, you have the 6-foot social distancing requirement, which was essentially, bullshit. I'm sure many of you remember the cute little footprints that were plastered throughout grocery stores and the malls and department stores. And in some cases, which was baffling, even outdoor venues. Initially, our government said that they were encouraging social distancing, but how it was carried out by public and, which was really sad, private entities was bordering on draconian. These weren't guidances. They were mandates. People were being forced to do this. Otherwise, they were not able to shop or to travel or to even go to their local park. Dr. Fauci was even questioned during one of the Senate hearings where he couldn't even remember where the social distancing distance of 6 foot was founded. He said, and I quote, "I don't recall, it just sort of appeared." And the same could be said about masks and mask mandates. Most of us remember at the very early stages, the public was encouraged not to wear masks, primarily because, they were in short supply for medical staff who actually needed them. We were also told at the time that they really don't stop the transmission of viruses, about the only time they didn't lie. And then as soon as Biden took office, you had Dr. Fauci telling people, you need to wear a mask. At first, anything that covered your mouth and nose was considered a mask. Hell, you could slap a bandana around your mouth and nose, and that was considered sufficient. But then soon afterwards, they started mandating specific types of masks, either surgical masks or N95, or I think the KN95. Then you had February 2021 mandate by Bumbling Joe that required everyone to wear masks on public transportation. And in the case of the mask mandate, the committee found that Biden did exceed his authority. And don't dare get me started about the fact that these mask mandates rolled into schools and some kids were forced to wear masks through the entire day, regardless of grade or age. So you had 4-year-old kindergarten kids wearing masks all day long. I remember seeing 4-year-old kids playing outside on the playground wearing masks. I have to tell you, for myself, I fucking hated those face diapers. But when I saw kids outside playing with masks on, it took every bit of restraint I could muster just to keep driving by. I'm embarrassed by that now. I should have said something. But I still see people in masks every once in a while. I used to think that these people were still afraid of contracting COVID. But now I kind of think that they are people who are just virtue signaling that they're kinder than people who don't wear masks. Libtards. Mike?
Holy shit, dude. I'm having flashbacks. Seriously. Total PTSD. And I feel the need to punch something, but I won't.
I appreciate that.
I'll try not to. I was never more frustrated than during, that whole period from 2020 through mid 2021. And I remember constantly looking around. All I could see was zombies. That's all I saw in people. Almost everybody was wearing masks. Everybody around me was a fucking dumbass. And that fucking 6-foot rule, as long as you're a quarter inch over the 6 feet, you're good. Poof. The virus dies. But then, when you go to a restaurant, you had to wear the face diaper. So you're walking around, you order your food or whatever. But when you sit down, then you can take it off, even though you were like less than 6 feet away from strangers. Maybe they were behind you, or maybe they're on the booth next to you, in front of you, or you're at the bar top at a bar. Same thing. You can take the mask off. And, it's like, I was like, what the fuck? And then the one that kills me is the plexiglass. So fucking Home Depot left that shit up for like 8 months, even after the mandates were dropped. So they removed the mandates requiring businesses to have plexiglass. I don't know if that was even a mandate. I think it's more of a business decision to put it up to protect their employees, I guess. So I was at Home Depot one day, and this was like several months after businesses started taking it down. So I knew at that point, if it was a mandate, it was no longer a mandate. If it was mandated early on, it was no longer a mandate at that point. So I let it go for a couple visits, but then I went there and I had it, and I asked to talk to the store manager, and I'm like, dude, when are you guys going to take this shit down? And they were like, well, we leave it up because some of the employees feel safer with it. And meanwhile, when I'm checking out, I'm at the register, you can't hear jack shit when they mumble through their diapers. So I have to poke my head around the plexiglass and ask them to repeat. And then they mumble some more because I can't hear them through their fucking mask to begin with. And then there's the vaccine mandates, and then restaurants and bars and events wouldn't even allow me to visit because I refused to get the jab. Dude, fuck this. I need to get a shot. I'll be right back. I'm serious.
Well, as Mike has left the room, I'm finally going to close with a little bit of good. With all the crap that's in the media and the Democrats gave Trump throughout his first term, especially with him having to deal with the onset of COVID-19 or the COVID-19 virus and the pandemic, the subcommittee did find that Operation Warp Speed that was initiated by the Trump administration was a, quote, great success that helped save millions of lives. The committee found that some of the life-saving strategies that the Trump administration employed allowed the rapid deployment of protective equipment like PPE, prophylactics, and even some treatments to Americans. In fact, Trump invoked the Defense Production Act for ventilator production to help speed the production and distribution of ventilators to severely impacted hospitals in most major cities. Trump employed numerous private companies to basically switch gears and manufacture or distribute life-saving equipment. Companies like Hanes and Jack Daniels and Anheuser-Busch, MyPillow, Brooks Brothers, Walmart, Tesla, 3M, and many others were involved. With all of the bad that happened as a result of the COVID-19 virus, I'm, actually kind of proud of the work that the Trump administration did early on, which has likely been all but forgotten, except by us here at the Office of the Patriot. Mike, how was your drink, by the way?
I needed it. I'll tell you that. Dude. Okay, so I definitely appreciated his efforts to do something that historically was never done before, and it didn't seem possible. I think a lot of us were doubting it could even happen, but his conviction was pretty powerful, and he was very forceful in his, making it happen. It was awesome. And, although I take issue with the so-called vaccines, but his heart was in the right place and he trusted the so-called experts. So I feel it was a mistake, but honestly, I think all of us would have done the same thing in his place. And I think without a doubt, there's no other president in history that could have acted as quickly and gotten stuff done like he did. And for that, I really commend him.
Agreed. As I said in the very beginning of this presentation, this report is over 500 pages long, and I've just scratched the surface of the information that's presented in the report. I'm hopeful that all of you take the time to read through it. because it is an enlightening and, in many cases, infuriating revelation about our government's intentions and the bureaucracy that carried the orders out. Now that this report has been made public, I'm hopeful that our leaders and representatives make use of the information, because the writing on the wall suggests that the sociopaths that are still embedded within the Democrat Party and within our government will likely try this pandemic bullshit again. But with this information, not only will we know what to do and what not to do next time, we'll be prepared for when they try to control us again through the use of fear and bullying. And this concludes today's episode of Office of the Patriot.
So, as always, if you've enjoyed the presentation, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share the channel on your social media. It's really appreciated.
What he said. Also, please take the time to comment. Viewer engagement via comments is the major metric for channel accessibility on most social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook and X or Twitter, MeWe, and Rumble. The more people that like, subscribe, and comment, the more this channel will come up when social and political content like this is searched for. And as always, have a blessed day. Stay safe out there.